Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar. My name is Michael Sieveking. I'm the Deputy Director of American Jewish Committee's Transatlantic Institute. I'm very pleased to welcome our viewers and listeners to this program, rather provocatively entitled, Are EU Funds Supporting Islamists? I represent an organization, AJC, that has long been committed to strengthening democratic values. History has taught us to be vigilant in preserving them, as they are the bedrock of democracy, fundamental rights, and the rule of law. Unfortunately, these values we all cherish continue to be under assault here in Europe and in America from extremists on the far right, the far left, and from Islamist extremists. It should therefore be an open and shut case that Western governments shouldn't empower, much less fund, groups that ultimately oppose and actively undermine Europe's democratic values. However, some organizations propagating extremism still inexplicably receive money from both EU and member states, often operating under the guise of charitable organizations. What's more, countries like Iran and Qatar, Turkey, for example, considered not free by the Freedom House Index, back places of worship and education, sidelining more moderate voices within the communities. These dangerous and often anti-Semitic ideologies are the breeding ground that contribute to radicalized individuals committing violence, as the 2014 attack on the Jewish Museum here in Brussels showed. And with that, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce today's distinguished panel, Vice President of the European Parliament, Nicola Beer, Monika Hohlmeier, Chair of the EU Parliament's Budget Committee, she'll be here any moment now, and Michael Laubsch, who is a policy analyst and member of the European Citizens Initiative Stop Extremism. Thanks for coming on the program. Last year, Germany stopped funding the organization Islamic Relief Germany over its ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and some of its leaders' anti-Semitic remarks. Europe, the EU, for its part, is still funding the group. Michael, let's start with you. This case of the Islamic Relief is rather emblematic of a larger problem. So if you could, walk us through this case and talk to us about the dangers of Islamism extremism, and also give us a sense of how widespread this problem really is.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Also a warm welcome here from Vienna. Yeah, you pointed it out already. The problem is that many organizations, religious organizations, charity organizations like Islamic Relief are acting in a publicly very charitable, nice way, but in fact they are not. They are supporting anti-Semitism, they are supporting terrorist institutions like Hamas, Hezbollah. And the main problem, I'm not a politician, I can say that, is that the policy, in fact, knows they have to know what's going on. But for a time, they didn't act accordingly. It was quite open that an organization like Islamic Relief is, in fact, also supporting extremist tendencies in the Islamic world, and at the same time is receiving fundings from EU or from EU member states. The example of Islamic Relief, as you asked me, I would say it is for people who don't know the structure of Islamic Relief. It's an international charity organization claiming to be an NGO supporting financially crises in regions where the majority of Muslims live, but also support, for example, poor Muslims in European countries through charity, through funding. And especially Islamic Relief Germany, they received within the last 10 years a lot of grants from the German government, for example, from the foreign ministry. It's about what I found out, about 15 million euros alone from the German foreign ministry. Although it was quite clear that members of the board of directors of Islamic Relief are related to extremist organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, like chief ideologists of Islamist preachers, etc. Luckily, the German government now denied any further granting, but huge charity foundations in Germany still fund Islamic Relief. So, for example, there is a big consortium of charity foundations in Germany. It's called Hilft, Aktion Deutschland Hilft, which granted just for the last annual report of Islamic Relief 2.2 million euros to this organization. So this is an example where we can see, on the one hand, that Europe and the national governments and institutions of the member states have to stop and have to openly say that, no, we don't support any charity groups, any institutions which in fact are somehow involved into extremism to any kind. So I'm not talking only about Islamists, it's also regarding right-wing, left-wing, but we have to give a clear sign also to not only to us Westerners, but also to the Muslim community here in Europe, that with our values, we must not support such groups.
That's a really great segue, I think, to our next point. And allow me first, Madam Vice President, and also this is directed also to Chair Monika Hohlmeier. Allow me to first thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's just so of such critical importance that we not allow this subject, which is rather sensitive in nature, to be hijacked by the far right parties like the AfD and others who wish and who seek to sow hatred and anti-Muslim bigotry and division in our pluralistic society. So let me first preface this with a big thank you. Vice President Beer, it was your party, the Liberal FDP, that pressed the German government on the Islamic Relief case. And it was ultimately a successful effort and led to the end of funding for this project. And you've also pressed the European Commission in a written question this past April on the same issue. So if you could share with us from your vantage point within the European Parliament what your take is on prospects of a possible shift in policy, and how come this is even happening when the evidence seems to be rather clear-cut, and yet a discussion seems to be going on. So I'd love to hear your views.
Yes, thank you. And thank you first for the invitation. I think this is a really important topic, especially because I think on the principle, everybody has the same opinion on that. The problem is that the cases often are very, very complicated because those connections, as Mr. Laubsch described them, are not visible. So this is a high complex area which is especially not transparent. And so I think it's very, very important to give this transparency and then to take the consequences. And yes, we tabled a lot of parliamentarian initiatives in Germany as well as in the European Parliament towards the Commission. I do not have an answer from the Commission on the last one, and I already tabled the next one because of the question of anti-Islamic school books. But this is maybe for a later point. So on this question, I think we have really to make this transparency. So reforming the system, how we select those organizations, really to have legal investigations on this, because this is the problem of the EU list. You only can take somebody on the EU list if it is proven that you can say these are extremists. So if there is only maybe not one hand, but 2-3 point indirect connections, then you have problems. And we know that Islamic Relief, for example, scheduled cases in the court. So they are disputing about how they can be named as extremists or not and whatever. And until those procedures are not finished, we don't have a chance on that. But I do not want to accept this, because I think then everybody is hiding behind the other one. Also, the German authorities do not give, for example, European Commission proofs, though that they could undermine such lists or others. I think we really have to investigate on this. I'm thinking about if it's not necessary to have a sort of subcommittee in the European Parliament, which is investigating on those unbiased funds and financing and the organizations which get the money. And maybe because it's so complicated and takes a lot of time to have this negative list, maybe we should also think about a positive list, because an organization like the mentioned Aktion Deutschland Hilft doesn't want to finance extremists, doesn't want to finance anti-Semitic work, but they are searching for a sort of accredited helpers, organizations in the region. And this is also a problem. Often we do not have enough trustworthy organizations on the ground. So with whom you work then? This is maybe not so urgent in measures where you have a longer time. So when we are speaking about normal support, but if we are on humanitarian side, so on quick aid, for example, now in the pandemic with medicine and others, so then you look, you have only one or two organizations on the ground, and then you fall in the trap, or you do not help. So I think we also have to speak about how to build up in civil society trustworthy organizations. You can work on a midterm basis, but also on the quick term relief if this aid is necessary. And so we should work on those different branches, more control and investigation, maybe a positive list with trustworthy people, and also building up in civil society on the ground, also maybe with our relations in the delegations of European Parliament. We have parliamentarian delegations, we have the Commission who could help building up those civil organizations we really can work with, because we know that not directly and not indirectly they are extremists or working with extremists or anti-Semitic organizations or persons. You are muted.
Yes. Oh, what a rookie mistake. Thank you, Vice President. And I'd like to really just say that's a fantastic idea. Sounds like an interesting input there from you to start a committee, an investigative panel on assessing trustworthy organizations. So you heard it here first. Sounds like a great plan. I'm gonna first of all welcome now Chair Monika Hohlmeier to the panel. We're thrilled that you can be here today, rather this afternoon. And you came.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, you've arrived at an excellent time, because we just were discussing the case of the Islamic Relief Germany, which I know you're very familiar with, and is, as our panelists thus far have said, emblematic of a larger problem. But let's kind of maybe get a little bit, put a finer point on this particular case. You chair the Budgetary Control Committee, which obviously is an important one. And from your position, how come, what's your assessment? How come EU funding is still reaching this organization while it seems that compelling evidence of its problematic nature is in? Germany has acted. Help us understand how the procedures go in the Parliament on funding, please.
I think from the point of view, first I would like to say hello to everybody. Hi, Nicola, and hello to Michael Laubsch and to you, the other Michael. So we have two Michaels today. First, from the con point of view, we were already discussing several times the issue of the school books. We were discussing the issue that there are, for example, organizations funded in Turkey constituting a problem in the point of view of democracy and rule of law, and even in the humanitarian area, doubtful. And from the point of view of NGO either. And if I take IRD, I think that the European Commission really have to reconsider. I think that the European Union has to get stronger in certain areas, and if there are NGOs that are not reliable, and where we cannot be 100% sure for what purposes really the money is used, because if the money is used, even if the money is used correctly, but we are feeding an organization that is very radical and extremist minded, then the help leads to a public opinion that this is a helpful organization, and that is an organization that is funded by the European Union. But if they are at the end contributing to extremist opinions in the public, then this constitutes really a very problematic situation. So we have to try to find in all these areas organizations that are really organizations that are reliable. As Nicola was mentioning it, normally Commission is already doing it. So it's not the only organization that we are subsidizing, but I think we have to rethink this process, and the Commission will have to rethink it. And at the end, we have to find reliable partners, and not partners where we at the end feed the extremists of the future. But for the sake of the European Commission, we have a lot of partners being really trustful partners, doing really a very good work, a lot of NGOs really doing a very valuable work, so that these are really exemptions and not the normal situation.
Thank you. Those are some reassuring words from your end. I'd like to pivot over to an important topic, which is the issue of anti-Semitism. And we know, unfortunately, that regardless of which strand of Islamist extremist ideology, there is a sort of continuous dealing and focus on Israel and the Jewish people and on the Jewish state. So for this reason, I'd like to turn back to you, Vice President. You head the anti-Semitism working group in the European Parliament. And I'd really just love to hear from you why you think that this issue is so important for Jewish life in Europe. What's your perspective?
And this is really important also because we see that a lot of people in Jewish communities, the Jews, are thinking over if they really stay in Europe. So we saw a lot of Jews, for example, leaving France, but I'm always really negatively surprised when I'm talking especially to younger Jews that they're really thinking over. And this is because we make not everybody aware where anti-Semitic expressions, opinions are hidden behind. And I think this is really also, it's really a question about awareness. And for this, the working group against anti-Semitism in the European Parliament is working especially of spreading out the IRA definition. Because, I mean, if you still continue about discussing what is anti-Semitism, then you do not mark it in society. And this is the reason why the definition, which is internationally recognized, is so important. We are really happy that is also adopted on the European level, but we really have to put it through in the different member states, because only if you use it within the authorities, within the educational system, so that the teachers, the prosecutors, the policemen, the civil servants, and also the public is really trained on it, then you have a sort of filter and you can make visible which is really anti-Semitism without introducing in your the freedom of your own opinion. But this is on the other side. Yeah? This is not to be anti-Semitic is not a part of freedom of expression or freedom of opinion. And so this is really important. We have to put this through, and then you can also discover organizations using, for example, these argument on we are only criticizing on Israel or Israel politics, when there is behind anti-Semitism, and not only criticizing a government, as I can criticize the Israeli one as well as the French or the German one, but when the real target is behind the anti-Semitism. And this is, for example, possible. You see the German National Parliament, the Bundestag, made a common decision about the BDS movement, clearly labeling as anti-Semitic. And this is important then for the consequences, how you can handle with those, so that they, for example, don't get fundings from public sources in public life, to make clear through the IRA definition on what we are really speaking, and not letting it in the flue of the discussion.
Thank you. And just to highlight again, you've really hit an important point there on the really recent spike of anti-Semitic incidents across Europe and America, and putting a finer point on the EU's policy on anti-Semitism, which is really developing rapidly. Last December, there was a decision to apply the fight against anti-Semitism across all policy areas, including external relations. And now I would like to turn to Monika Hohlmeier, Chair, on how these external instruments, funding for organizations abroad, how can the topic of anti-Semitism be really brought into this equation when decisions are made on whether to fund or not to fund an organization? You're muted.
I think we are in a very similar situation, as I mentioned it before. We saw there some fundings of the EU Commission to people that were not trustful, or to organizations that were not trustful. I mentioned already the case of Farid Hafiz and the Islamophobia report. This report is, for example, a report that is really unacceptable that the European Union was funding it explicitly, but explicitly they are mentioning that certain organizations have really a hidden agenda. They have an agenda that is in the public very friendly, humanitarian, democratic. They are expressing that they're in favor of rule of law, but they have another agenda of rule of law as the one that the European Union has. So there, I think really Commission has to be very careful, more careful as they have been before. Secondly, we see explicitly in North Africa and in certain other areas that there are extremist funding, not by the European Union, but the European Union is not aware or is not enough active in the area, in certain areas where Islamistic activists or well-funded organizations are spreading Islamistic trends. So young people that are trained, young people that are seen as possible instrument, not as human beings, but as instruments to lose their lives for Islamistic purposes. The name of those organizations are very often humanitarian organizations having educational purposes, having cultural purposes. So they are quite clever in the way they act. They are helpful to the population, but the agenda is a hidden one, but at the end it works. So I think that really it is absolutely important that European Union is more careful, that we are not so actively understanding that in other areas of the world there are other situations, or as I heard it here in the European Parliament from some colleagues, yes, school books, but you know, they must be the same school books as other school books. I said, yes, listen, we have to destroy all these kind of school books where violence is and hatred and hate speech and extremism and terrorism is glorified. So we have to do wherever, or if it's social media, if it's we have to be more aware about the disinformation campaigns in the social media, in the internet, the networks of the extremists. So because anti-Semitism is not only starting in the normal society, it is starting by the humanitarian aid that is funded from extremist organizations, from very Islamistic families. So it starts there. So we have to be careful to really organize us in those areas so that the European funding is clearly going to organizations, or even having own organizations, to fund peace, to fund peaceful processes, to fund really humanitarian aid, to stop radical extremism already where it's spreading at the moment. And we see there are several areas being really quite problematic. So I think we really have to do our work. But I think the Commission is meanwhile more aware. Or Nicola, what do you think? I think Commission really tries to, and they are always very alarmed if we are talking about it. But I would like now to read the study that was produced at DG NEAR and that they are hiding at the moment. We would like to have this study because I want to see what is written in, and I'm very astonished that this study was not published when it appeared. So I was astonished by the report of the German ministry saying, Horst Seehofer telling me, listen, this study is already existing, and we always heard that it is not existing, that it's still in production and still not ready. I would like to read it. So we must be quite open. And sorry if I say not only abroad, not only in third states. If I think for my own country, something we have too much understanding for people being quite aggressive. So being quite anti-tolerant to Jewish community. If somebody is wearing a kepi that looks only like a Jewish one, then people sometimes in Berlin are already heard it. We should be very attentive there and not too much understand that young people, that they can be aggressive. No, that's not normal behavior. We have to be very clear. If there are manifestations with anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism, this should not be accepted. This is a reason to forbid a manifestation. I think we should be more clear there and not leave the police alone in the street with then thousands of people being quite radical in their opinion.
Thank you. And I think I would even double down on what you said about tolerance. We don't only want tolerance for a diverse, pluralistic society, but we want to embrace all backgrounds. And it seems to me from what you've said that you've made the Commission aware, the European Commission aware of the issue, as has been reported widely and is widely known through the channels of Parliament. In addition to that, Michael Laubsch, on our panel here, you were involved with the Stop Extremism Citizens Initiative. So if you could just give us a quick rundown of the goals of that initiative, how far has it come, and maybe some of the findings along the way.
Yes. Well, we thought, especially the founders of this idea, setting up a European Citizens Initiative fighting extremism, that we need, on the European level, we need some tools really to challenge and to fight extremist tendencies. Now we're not talking about only religiously motivated extremism, but also right-wing extremism and left-wing extremism. And we realized when we drafted our directive for the European Commission that in science, there is always a debate what is extremist and what is not extremist. So we thought that the European Charter of Fundamental Rights is a quite good guideline for defining what is extremist and what is not. So if someone is violating or denying any paragraph of the European Charter, he or she is extremist. That's all what we say. And the fact is that extremist organizations in education, in charity, is always present here in Europe. We thought it also might be a good idea to set up a kind of certificate, a certificate called Extremism Free. So organizations, charity organizations, education organizations have together a European official EU certificate for, yes, we are supporting the fundamental rights of the European Union. This is the basis of our work. And this would directly mean that an extremist or a radical organization acting in the EU would not be allowed to receive any EU funds or funds from any national member states. So this was the case, and we had 1 year of time to collect 1 million signatures. We were successful in collecting 1.5 million signatures EU-wide, and because of Corona, everything was a little bit delayed at the moment, but all the signatures are now in Brussels, and we are waiting for a decision to have a hearing at the European institutions, debating our proposal for a directive, and we see how it goes. But I think besides this, I really agree with Nicola and also with Monika. Beside an official organizational structure, we have to, in our societies, we have to fight for more tolerance, we have to fight for openness, and we also have to fight for a clear and open point by saying this organization is an extremist organization. Sometimes I have the feeling, I'm also working for MENA Research Center here in Vienna, together with many Muslim communities, that sometimes, especially when we talk about the European Union and the values, sometimes it doesn't reach the communities we want to reach, because we use communications channels that those communities never heard of. And this is also a fact I would like to underline, that we have to be aware of the fact that information communication within those communities is totally different from ours. When I go back to the Islamic Relief case, with MENA Research Center, we just read the annual reports in Arabic by the Islamic Relief. And the text and the numbers are totally different from the German version of the annual report or the English version. The fact is, anti-Semitic wordings every third page, fundings which are not in the English or German edition. So this is something where we have to say, okay, the communication has to be different. And I really agree with Nicola's statement that the European institutions need a research pool from outside, but also from inside, who is really investigating what's going on. And I'm not talking about intelligence services, but resources which are open, but not monitored so far.
Michael, I'd like to stay with you for just one moment, because we've been talking quite a bit about the special variants of the Sunni Islamist organization linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. And we sometimes don't fully acknowledge the threat that the Shia organization Hezbollah poses, and how it operates through, alongside the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Islamic Revolutionary Guards, I should say, through so-called Islamic Center in Hamburg. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that particular case, and how can it be that the city of Hamburg is still in official partnership with this organization? And if either of you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice President, would like to comment, of course, also.
I clearly can say I don't know why Hamburg is still supporting the Islamic Center in Hamburg. I really have no clue. It is what I said in my first statement. It is also with these organizations. It is so obvious that it has not only members or board members which are close to the mullah regime in Tehran, but the whole structure of the organization is dependent on Tehran and what's going on there. And they only send responsible people to the IZH in Hamburg who are taught and who are, let's say, infiltrated by the mullah regime in Iran. So I have no clue why a state entity like the state of Hamburg and the Senate there is still tolerated. You still have to have in mind that the Islamic Center in Hamburg, it is now obvious that it has close ties, connections directed by Tehran, is, for example, responsible for the Islamic education in the schools of Hamburg. They are part of the organizations which dictate what pupils in Hamburg, Muslim pupils, are taught with. And this is unbelievable. And they still get a lot of money. And I have to tell and ask the politicians here, please talk to your colleagues in Hamburg. They have to stop this. This is an anti-Semitic organization supporting Hezbollah, supporting the destruction of Israel, and it's unbelievable.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Vice President.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I tabled a parliamentarian request on that topic towards the German government some years ago when it came up for first time. And I totally agree. I think from some sides of some of those regional governments, it's a misunderstanding of a form of tolerance towards Islam religion. But Islamic and extremist use of religion has not to be tolerated. So this is all to be in the framework of our constitution on the national levels as well as on the European level. And there the respect towards others, also towards other religions, is part of this. And so we cannot work together with organizations not recognizing these really crucial principles of values of values in our European societies, as well as on national and on European level. And I think really it is also important not only to speak about member states funding and European Union funding, but especially also on third state funding of organizations acting here on European ground. Because they do the same as they do in different international regions. They then have a really big impact on those communities on the ground. They come around with cultural or educational impact on that. And we cannot even control because we do not speak the language. This is also a reason why I would go a little bit more differentiated with the question of Islamic religious education in our national schools, because I really think that is a big chance to have a CIVI in these schools, which is controlled by the state, who is controlling what is happening in schools, because in the mosques, we cannot do it. And who is controlling that we have really reliable teachers and not an imam paid by a third state speaking in a language nobody of the authorities is understanding. You only have to make sure that the partners we are cooperating with on that are really reliable and trustworthy, not anti-Semitic on this point. This is often difficult because those communities of religion are not organized as we know it, for example, from the churches. So you do not have a structure, but I think it is worth, a little bit like we spoke about for humanitarian aid, it is worth to engage in building up those structures for those who are really reliable so that we can cooperate and get rid of those external financed, not being controlled organizations in the heart of our communities.
I'm going to read to you, thank you, Mrs. Beer. I'm going to read to you a short sentence from the 2018 European Parliament Special Committee on Terrorism report, which Mrs. Hohlmeier, I'm sure you're very familiar with, since you very much involved. Yes, you wrote it. And one point really just dovetail what was just said by the Vice President. The member states are called upon to ban funding from third countries that oppose democracy, rule of law, and human rights. What a statement. So just wanted to give that along the way. And if you want to take it from here, Mrs. Hohlmeier.
So there in our report, we really analyzed in the work before. We did it for more than 1.5 years. We analyzed the situation, how extremism is funded and how extremism is spread out. And there we identified several areas where this is happening. And we see explicitly one point that Nicola has mentioned, the funding from several states, often several, as they are called, very conservative. No, I wouldn't say conservative because that's the wrong word for it. It's not conservative what they are doing explicitly, as I'm a conservative from the CSU, but I don't want to be compared with this kind of extremism. These are extremist families, very rich families, funding in third states. Is it better now?
Yeah, okay. We hear you.
Fine. And I think it's absolutely necessary to identify very early when these kind of structures are appearing. They're appearing at the moment in the Western Balkans. They are appearing in North Africa and in West Africa. They are appearing in certain other parts of this world. And I think European Union has to get a better strategy. Secondly, they are funding in the European Union, nearly in all member states. Explicitly, France has a huge problem. Austria analyzed the problems. Michael Laubsch, you know it explicitly what Austria did to analyze the situation and what aggressive reactions were coming from then the extremist organizations. They are funding the imams, they are funding certain Quran schools, they are funding churches, they are funding educational services, they are funding cultural services, they are funding integration organization, but they are in reality not integrating, they are doing the contrary. They are really not educating or teaching the European values. They are doing the other way around. When I was minister responsible in Bavaria for schools, I had a huge debate. Why? Because I was the first one declaring that DTIP is not the right partner for the Turkish young pupils in the Bavarian schools. After this, it was incredible what happened. It is still now, you all know Seyran artist, for example. If she is really acting in her freedom as a woman and saying, I have my interpretation of a religion, that's her right to have it. But she needs the security forces of Germany to be protected for her life. So, and we are accepting something like this as a normal situation. So I'm absolutely sure what we have written in our report. So we have to stop terrorist financing. We have to stop extremist financing. We have to stop that it is possible to finance from a third state in Germany, in Austria, or in France, churches, schools, whatever, because we don't have it in our hands who it is. And they all come with perhaps my very, very personal event that I had as minister. There was one day coming a very nice man discussing with us the whole evening. It was really, he was very intelligent, he was well integrated, he seemed to be a very interesting partner, and he offered us he would like to be partner with his organization to help us to integrate young Muslim pupils. So listen to it. At the end, I was asking my Minister of Interior if this man is known. Okay, at the end, this was Muslim Brotherhood in a very nice new clothes. Nobody knew it. But we have to be better aware. There is terrorist financing, there is extremist financing, they are using information system, they are using social media, they create their structures inside member states. I think a better awareness is really necessary to protect all kinds of religions and to protect our freedom and to protect our tolerance that we really want to have in the European Union.
That's a great summary there. I'm just gonna point out that we are fast running out of time, so we're gonna do a quick lightning round. And Mrs. Hohlmeier, you alluded to it in your earlier remarks on a study commissioned by the European Union on Palestinian textbooks that have, in previous reports, been shown to contain troubling material that is anti-Semitic, containing incitement, glorification of martyrdom, while teachers and those drafting the texts reportedly are documented to be on the receiving end of EU funds. So with all of this in mind, just last week, as everyone on this panel knows, the media outlet Bild Zeitung and the Jerusalem Post both leaked some extensive examples that were rather shocking. So I'd love to just have a quick round before we turn to the audience. We do have a couple of questions there if we could get your take, and also allow me to maybe just rewind for 1 second and thank both you, Mrs. Beer and Mrs. Hohlmeier, for signing on to the Transatlantic Friends of Israel declaration calling for to ban Hezbollah. That was very meaningful and important. So let's go to those textbooks. Maybe, Madam Vice President, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. Part of the problem is, as Monika already told us, that we do not have the study for the moment. There was a pre-study phase, and obviously they worked on it further, but we already asked the Commission, I tabled a request on that, to have the study, and especially also I asked them the question, what is their consequence taken on that? So from what they are learning from this. So I'm really curious to know this, but what is clear for me, and that there the textbook question is part of a huge problem, is that we have to prevent absolutely that EU funds are used to support measures which promote anti-Semitism and extremism, hate and aggression, and especially also in the region which is now mentioned in Israel, Palestine, and so on. I mean, the problem is that direct you can see, indirect is much more complicated. So for example, European Union is not financing textbooks. We are financing teachers. But it is clear that at the end, it's not our aim that we finance teachers using anti-Semitic, aggressive, extremist textbooks. So how to get on the textbooks? Because everybody on us will be, I think, agreeing that we need schools also in this region, that if people, if young people are not going to school, but under the impact and the pressure of Islamic organization outside, then we have maybe a huge problem. So we have really to work on this problem. And I think that we should use funds also to get rid of those textbooks and having good textbooks, which really try to integrate, which are not extremist, which are not really giving speed to this hate, which is now, if this is proved in those things. So I really think we should work on funding, for example, organizations of teachers, of parents and others to change these textbooks so that the teacher we are financing can work with good material. I mean, often I think it's not the majority who wants to have those textbooks. They want just give good education for their pupils. So then give them the right material. Let us work not only on paying the teachers, but also let us work on good funding for good material. And I think also we should think about maybe also using, like in the Magnitsky Act, our possibilities of direct sanctions on the PA authority persons who try who are corrupt and who try also to use or misuse fundings, for example, for such textbooks.
Mrs. Hohlmeier, you in the latest discharge report, I believe, have been instrumental in bringing in language that calls on the Commission, if I'm reading this correctly, to be made conditional upon its compliance with UNESCO standards. So that seems pretty to the point. What has the feedback been so far? And love to hear from you.
The feedback now is that UNRWA would like to discuss with us how to realize this, the Commission either. Explicitly, UNRWA was announcing that they are no more working with these old school books, that they are in future working with a new platform curricula in the internet that is produced by on the standards of the UNESCO. I was very astonished sometimes here in the Parliament that even we didn't have a majority for these kind of amendments, may I say it, because some people believed, we should not involve us, and I think we have to involve us, because if thousands of young people are ready to be killed and are ready to run for extremist ideas, this must come from somewhere. So school is an essential system to try to create more tolerance. So I think we should use the modernized systems, and we really should only accept UNESCO standards, and UNRWA must comply with this. This is an absolute necessity.
Michael? You are muted.
Totally agree with both what Nicola and Monika said. I think we must not say, okay, this is something that is outside of the European Union, so why should we take care of? We should fund something, and what the topics are is not of our concern. It is. Especially in this region, it is essential because we know already that there is a direct line of communication, relatives from Palestine to Europe. They are connected. So this is something where, when we support education in a way that it represents our freedom of expression, our values of tolerance. This is not only helpful for the people on the ground there, but it is helpful for the whole community. I'm definitely sure it is. So I would be very pleased if your proposition, Monika, would be executed, definitely.
I'm just gonna go ahead and agree with that 100% and add that it's from our organization's perspective, it would be a real improvement to have Palestinian youth be educated toward peace and reconciliation and coexistence, and so that we can work towards a negotiated two-state solution. And with that, I would like to turn to my colleague Jonas Markowitz, who I believe has some questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Michael. We will now take questions from the audience. You may email your questions at tai@ajc.org or by using the Q&A chat featured in Zoom. Please let us know to whom the question is directed to. Our first question is from Yoni. Are there civic institutions available to Europe's Muslim communities that foster cooperation with the Jewish community and provide viable alternatives and pushback to anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric? What can and does the EU do to support these institutions?
Volunteers?
Yes, there are institutions, and but they are not as well funded from outside as others are. So I think the European Union has to analyze what kind of organizations or what kind of structure. I was not very happy about the Commission when they were refusing to create the how we called it, Michael Laubsch, the Institute Against Extremism and Against Hatred, because we thought that this could be a point or an organization where we can try to get in contact with all those organizations being not linked to the radical and extremist organizations, and giving them a starting point where they can meet each other, where they can exchange each other, where we can have conferences, where we can create something like I would like to say a melting pot, a positive, tolerant melting pot, to counter all these extremist organizations being funded from outside in a very tough way. They really receive millions for their extremist purposes or radical purposes. So to counter, really, we need the readiness of the Commission to introduce something like a system where we can create a network, and where we can, the Commission was promising it, till now we didn't see anything. So we will remind now the Commission that they promised to us, this was the Vice President, it was the Commissioner for Budget either. So both were really promising that they would do something. At the moment, perhaps they were a little bit bound by MFF and some other issues of RFF. But I think now these debates are a little bit over. We should renew this idea to create a network and to give organizations a chance that are tolerant, that are willing to work together with other religions, so that several religions can meet, where we have organizations that are really integrative character, and that we are really working with the Muslim world, because there are a lot of Muslim people. We have to speak with them, but not with these radical extremist organizations, always being in the TV, always having a lot of money for doing public marketing. We have to speak with normal people who are willing to work with us, and I think we should give them a chance. And I think that the Commission at the moment is still not aware enough of the situation, not active enough. There I'm a little bit critical.
Yes, but I think it's really the chance after the decision in the Council last year in December to make the fight against extremism, the fight against anti-Semitism, really a cross-cutting issue. I think we have this window of opportunity now to go forward also with proposals from the Commission, and then also to reflect them down in the different member states. So just we have to not let the pressure go on these channels.
And perhaps, Nicola, sometimes member states are only discussing, let's stop extremism. Yes, I'm ready, but we have to do it on the positive side either. So not only police and not only the issue. I'm very in favor of security issues, no problem. But I think we have to think on education, on what can we do for network, what can we do to give a platform to normal Muslim people in the European Union, so that they have a chance to create their own networks, not to be obliged to deal with these extremist organizations.
Michael,
let me maybe add just one more point. I totally agree with you, because we still have to remember that the vast majority of Muslims is on our side. Those who are speaking, those radical Islamists, they are not the majority. They are not the majority. But we have to be careful, and that's what I really would like to underline what Monika said. We have to have the open dialogue with this majority, because this majority is now only listening in their holistic system. Oh, there is the German Interior Minister meeting the main Muslim Brotherhood guy in Germany and is signing a contract of cooperation. This is something which was written in the newspapers in the Arab world, which in fact was not true. Mr. Seehofer, during the Islam conference, was having a meeting with the director of the Zentralrat der Muslime in Germany, who is close to the Muslim Brotherhood, but there was no contract. But they try to set up such a story, and this is something we have to defend, and we have to have this network, this interreligious, interethnical network, bringing those majorities on our side.
I think that's ending it on a positive note, because this is really all the time we have. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Vice President Nicola Beer, Chair Monika Hohlmeier, and Michael Laubsch for you taking the time to join this fascinating webinar. I will ask Jonas to please take it from here.
On behalf of AJC, we would like to thank our distinguished panelists again for such a timely and insightful discussion. Please stay tuned with AJC. Our next event will honor the memory of Babi Yar on June 21st at 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time or 12 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, please visit our social media or ajc.org. Please stay safe and healthy. We are looking forward to seeing you again soon on our programs.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.